In the fading light of April 1945, as artillery still echoed beyond Berlin, a small band of American intelligence officers stepped over broken glass and smoldering files inside a half-shattered German rocket lab. Their mission was not to seize blueprints or confiscate machinery, but to locate living minds, the designers and doctors and chemists who had spent 6 years perfecting weapons for Adolf Hitler. Washington called the operation Project Overcast at first, then switched to a name that felt harmless, Operation Paperclip, inspired by the metal clips that would soon hold clean resumes over blood-stained dossiers. The man who approved each visa and erased each crime was Colonel Sidney Truscott, Jr., chief of the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, a gatekeeper armed with authority and a stack of red editing pencils. Truscott wrote in one classified memo that any disclosure of Nazi pasts would, in his words, jeopardize national security objectives, a phrase that would justify 1,000 deliberate omissions. In less than 12 months, the United States transported more than 1,600 German specialists to bases in Texas, Ohio, Alabama, New Mexico, and Maryland, far more than the public ever learned at the time. Among them stood Wernher von Braun, former SS major, the charismatic engineer who dreamed of reaching the moon while V-2 rockets exploded over London and Antwerp. His Peenemoon notebooks included handwritten requests for fresh concentration camp labor, yet his new American personnel file described him as non-political and apolitical, a brilliant scientist caught in unfortunate circumstances. Arthur Rudolph came too, a man who managed the Mittelwerk tunnel factory, where 20,000 prisoners died assembling rockets underground, an environment so toxic that guards wore masks while inmates coughed blood. Rudolph's original security rating labeled him 100% Nazi and dangerous, but a single paperclip and a rewritten paragraph turned him into a valuable aerospace consultant worthy of immediate citizenship. Hubertus Strughold arrived quietly at Wright Field in Ohio, bringing Luftwaffe altitude data gathered from Dachau prisoners strapped into vacuum chambers, data later used to design Gemini and Apollo cabin pressures. The official Surgeon General's summary removed Dachau from his biography and praised his indispensable expertise. And for 50 years, NASA awarded a space medicine trophy bearing his name. The contradictions mount quickly when archived paperwork finally emerges from brown folders decades later. A 1946 Army legal review declared that importing these men violated the War Crimes Act signed only months earlier. Truscott's solution, recorded in blue pencil, was simple. He changed every arrival date to precede the law's enforcement window, retroactively legalizing the illegal. When State Department lawyers protested, Truscott forwarded a blunt note to Secretary of War Robert Patterson. National security overrides moral liability, period. The public saw sanitized press releases that spoke of a handful of German experts assisting post-war research. Nothing more, nothing less. Life magazine photographed von Braun's smiling team at Fort Bliss, standing beside mock rocket fins while barbed wire fences just outside the frame kept reporters from the separate barracks marked German personnel only. Across the ocean, the Soviet Union was running Operation Osovey-Akim, kidnapping entire departments of German scientists to Siberian design bureaus, a mirror that Truscott used to defend every questionable waiver he issued. Yet the American variant went further, weaving former SS officers into televised culture, turning von Braun into a Disney star who explained orbital mechanics to suburban children on Sunday evening broadcasts. No broadcast mentioned that Dora prisoners were hanged from crane hooks as warnings for slowing their work on the same rockets now celebrated as symbols of freedom. Modern engineers who attempt to replicate the V-2 turbopump tolerances without the original Peenemoon drawings often fail, demonstrating how essential those captured documents were to early Redstone guidance. When NASA historians simulated production schedules with ethical labor standards, their models predicted launch delays of years, a logistical echo of the human lives originally expended underground. In 1990, the Department of Justice finally opened an investigation into Arthur Rudolph after fresh survivor testimonies placed him in executions. But Rudolph's defense team produced his JIOA dossier stamped, cleared by U.S. Army. Faced with evidence that Washington itself had laundered Rudolph's past, prosecutors negotiated a compromise. Rudolph surrendered his passport and quietly flew back to Hamburg, untried, unconvicted, pension intact. That legal stalemate became known among scholars as the Rudolph precedent, an informal proof that once a crime is cloaked in classified approval, it becomes almost impossible to prosecute later. Hidden boxes still wait on metal shelves in College Park, Maryland, sealed cartons labeled Provisional Dossiers Restricted, each bearing a War Department inventory code and no accessible index. An archivist's slip from 2014 lists inside one carton a file titled Psychochemical Interrogation Consultant, nationality Germany, arrival date pending declassification. Another line references Unit 731 liaison report, hinting that paperclip chemists may have bridged Nazi nerve gas research with data harvested by Imperial Japan. Freedom of Information requests for those cartons return the same reply every year. Review ongoing. National security considerations remain. Journalist Linda Hunt pried open earlier boxes in 1985 and uncovered JIOA meeting minutes where Alan Dulles predicted that Soviet acquisition of German specialists would nullify every American nuclear advantage. Historian Annie Jacobson later found a handwritten addendum. Project success requires complete sanitization of personnel records to mitigate congressional backlash. Holocaust scholar Michael Neufeld traced von Braun's yearly visits to Dora by matching locomotive manifests, proving the engineer's awareness of lethal conditions, contrary to his televised denial. Each revelation erodes the romantic narrative of American rocketry, built solely on Midwest ingenuity and Ivy League math. Yet defenders of paperclip insist the moral compromise was unavoidable, pointing to Sputnik in 1957, a metallic beep orbiting overhead that seemed to justify every earlier erasure. They argue that without von Braun, the United States might never have planted flags on the moon, a claim that blends technical truth with convenient amnesia. A broader view shows that every Cold War superpower borrowed from the same conquered source, but only the United States celebrated its recruits on primetime television. Colonel Truscott retired in 1958, receiving a Legion of Merit citation for scientific procurement, then vanished from headlines, his personal papers still classified under a family restriction clause. One surviving photograph captures Truscott shaking von Braun's hand at Redstone Arsenal beneath a banner reading Gateway to Space, both men grinning. No mention of Dora, no mention of the 20,000 dead. Meanwhile, families of those prisoners received no compensation, no acknowledgement, their testimonies buried in untranslated German court files until digitization efforts in the 21st century. When NASA finally removed Struggold's name from its Space Medicine Award in 2012, the press release cited sensitivity to community concerns, not complicity in Dachau atrocities. Television retrospectives still describe von Braun as a visionary who escaped tyranny rather than as an officer who thrived inside it. The persistent myth survives because the original paperwork remains hard to access, requiring travel, clearance, and persistence most viewers will never attempt. Yet the shadows of Mittelwerk linger in every slow-motion Saturn V launch clip, invisible but inseparable, a moral exhaust plume the camera never shows. Ask engineers at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum about the provenance of early guidance computers, and they will mention Peenemünde algorithms in hushed tones, off-record. Ask the archivists why certain folders stay sealed 80 years later, and they cite classification authority, even though the war ended in 1945. The pattern matches other Cold War secrets, whether MK Ultra dosing or Project SHAD shipboard tests, evidence suppressed to protect reputations rather than to guard present capability. Paperclip, therefore, stands as the template for modern talent extractions. From post-Soviet cyber specialists to sanctioned missile engineers recruited under new visas. The trade remains the same: grant amnesty, bury the past, harvest expertise, hope the public never notices the price. For historians, the unanswered questions grow narrower yet deeper. Who is named in those provisional dossiers? How many were funneled into biological programs at Fort Detrick? What data crossed from Dora to CIA black sites? The gatekeeper may be gone, but his filing system endures. Metal clips still gripping morally radioactive pages that could redefine how classrooms teach the space race. One day, a future declassification order may finally peel away those clips, exposing signatures, requisitions, and perhaps personal letters that reveal private doubts of men who accepted the bargain. Until then, the sanitized storyline remains public truth. Rockets rose, heroes smiled, America won, end of lesson. Yet every Apollo countdown replayed in documentaries carries an echo from the tunnel beneath the Harz Mountains where prisoners once counted their last breaths. Remember that echo the next time you watch archival footage of a Saturn V lifting off. White smoke billowing against a Florida sky, crowds cheering beneath banners of liberty. Remember that science can soar on wings built from forgotten bones. Progress can ride the shoulders of men whose crimes were clipped out with a single stroke of bureaucratic metal. And remember that history held together by paperclips is history waiting to be unfastened. Will the United States ever face the full ledger of debts incurred by Operation Paperclip? Or will the remaining dossiers crumble unread in archival darkness? The answer rests inside those sealed boxes, behind redacted ink, and within a national conscience still negotiating how much truth it can bear. Our next investigation opens one of those neighboring boxes, labeled Project Stargate, where intelligence officers tried to weaponize the human mind itself. Until then, keep tugging at every clipped corner, because the hidden pages often change everything we think we know.